The imperial status of the United States was built on industrial capacities the world had never seen. However, the financialization of the economy marked a turning point. At first glance, the United States still appears powerful, yet the empire cracks slowly from within. Statistical metrics create an illusion of dominance, projecting confidence while masking real economic and industrial decline. Yet, upon closer inspection, the United States drifts inexorably toward decline, losing its productive and social momentum. The empire survives only as long as the rest of the world believes in it and continues to finance its power. Until then, society stagnates, and the gap between the wealthy elite and the population grows rapidly. Can the United States reverse these trends and successfully reindustrialize its economy to restore global hegemony? Or is the only remaining option to maintain the perception of imperial status while controlling existing geopolitical positions? After World War II, the United States was not merely another great power, but represented a qualitatively new form of imperial dominance unparalleled in history. Europe and Japan lay in ruins, while the American industrial base remained intact, further strengthened during the wartime years, consolidating its unprecedented economic power. More than half of global industrial production was concentrated on U.S. territory, and the dollar, backed by unmatched gold reserves, became the central pillar of the new international monetary system. The Bretton Woods Order institutionalized this dominance, creating mechanisms through which the United States projected its economic and political influence worldwide with remarkable efficiency. The International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and later GATT, were not neutral institutions, but instruments through which American power extended across global finance and governance structures. Unlike classical colonial empires, U.S. hegemony was built not on direct occupation, but through industrial superiority, financial stability, and control over key global institutions. During this period, America functioned primarily as a productive empire, with real wages rising, a growing middle class, and social compromises between labor and capital, ensuring domestic stability. This domestic stability was essential for sustaining external hegemony, providing a strong and secure internal base from which the United States could exercise influence worldwide. However, by the late 1960s and early 1970s, early signs of strain in this model began to appear, with slowing productivity, declining profit rates, and rising costs of maintaining global military and political dominance. A turning point occurred in 1971, when the United States unilaterally abandoned the gold standard, effectively dismantling the Bretton Woods system and signaling a profound shift in global economic order. This was not merely a technical monetary adjustment, but a historic marker indicating a new phase of American hegemony, where traditional industrial solutions were increasingly inadequate. Instead of restoring economic strength through reindustrialization and investment in real productive capacity, American elites opted for a different path, embracing a neoliberal model of governance and economic management. Financial deregulation, deindustrialization, offshoring production to low-wage countries, and the rapid expansion of IVE capital became the new foundation of American power, reshaping its global strategy. Gradually, the United States ceased to be the workshop of the world, transforming into a global financial rentier whose influence relied more on credit and speculation than on productive output. As Giovanni Arrighi noted, this transition from productive to financial dominance is a classic signal of imperial maturity and also the early stages of systemic decline within any great empire. Temporary increases in elite wealth mask the deep erosion of the real economic base and underlying social stability that had supported long-term hegemony. Neoliberalism, therefore, was neither a mere ideological whim nor a simple economic doctrine, but a structural response to the empire confronting its inherent limitations. The problem, however, was that this response ultimately accelerated the processes that made American hegemony increasingly dependent on financial bubbles, mounting debt, and military power rather than genuine industrial and technological supremacy. As the American economy increasingly relied on the financial sector, it simultaneously became structurally more fragile, its foundations dependent on speculative bubbles rather than productive growth. The first serious warning of this shift came with the collapse of the dot-com bubble in 2001, when excessive speculation in technology stocks triggered a sudden and dramatic market crash. Instead of serving as a cautionary signal, this crisis became a pattern, demonstrating that the economy could no longer self-correct without government intervention or structural adjustments. A far more devastating blow occurred in 2008 during the global financial crisis, triggered by the collapse of the subprime mortgage market and widespread failures in banking institutions. Mass bankruptcies, emergency government bailouts, and systemic panic revealed how deeply the American economy had become reliant on financial bubbles for perceived stability and growth. From that moment on, financial crises ceased to be exceptions and became a persistent feature of the system, recurring with increasing frequency and severity over time. In the contemporary period, banking collapses and market shocks repeat regularly, events unimaginable just decades ago at the center of the global financial system. This instability arises because nearly all major asset classes, real estate, stocks, and financial derivatives, are chronically overvalued, with prices assumed to rise indefinitely. These assumptions inevitably produce new speculative bubbles, and when they burst, cycles of economic instability, political panic, and social uncertainty are triggered across the nation. Financialization has also dramatically increased inequality, concentrating gains in the hands of a narrow elite, while the majority of the population experiences stagnation or decline. Most of the profit and newly created wealth now flows to the wealthiest 1%, deepening the divide between economic elites and the rest of society in both opportunity and influence. The result is a rentier economy where wealth is generated through ownership of assets rather than productive labor or innovation, fundamentally altering the social contract for future generations. For younger Americans, home ownership has become nearly unattainable, stable career paths are rare, and economic security is considered a luxury rather than a guarantee. In this system, speculation has replaced production as the primary driver of wealth, and economic instability has become a permanent state, shaping politics, society, and daily life. All of this demonstrates that the financialization of the American economy is not merely an economic issue, but a profound social and political process, eroding the structural cohesion of the nation. The central question, therefore, is not whether this model is unsustainable, but how America arrived at this stage, and why escaping it has become exceedingly difficult. The central problem of the American system today is not simply poor economic trends, but their transformation into structural flaws that cannot be corrected without systemic collapse. Financialization of the economy, deep corruption among political and economic elites, and total dependence on speculative capital have created a system that can no longer be reformed without self-destruction. American elites possess neither political interest nor material incentive to abandon the existing model, as the financial sector benefits directly from instability, debt growth, and recurring speculative bubbles. Any serious attempt at reindustrialization would require redistributing power, enduring profit declines, and dismantling the entrenched rentier order, consequences unacceptable to those currently in control. In this context, chronic debt accumulation becomes not an anomaly, but a fundamental operating mechanism, ensuring the system continues functioning despite lacking a productive economic base. The American economy no longer survives through production, but because the rest of the world continues to believe the United States remains the global hegemon, maintaining confidence in the dollar. This perception allows the dollar to retain its status as the world's reserve currency, enabling America to borrow indefinitely without immediate consequences for its financial system. In other words, American debt is backed not by economic strength, but by geopolitical credibility, reinforced by the perception of U.S. control over trade, energy, and military interventions. As long as the world believes America can enforce its will globally, the dollar remains a safe haven, and the financial system continues functioning despite structural weaknesses. The war in Ukraine represents the first serious attempt by a major power to challenge this perception, testing the narrative of American invincibility on a geopolitical stage. Russia's intervention is not merely a regional conflict, but a direct challenge to U.S. imperial narratives, questioning claims of unmatched American military and political supremacy. Regardless of the ultimate outcome, the act of challenging American power has already altered global perceptions of the international order and the credibility of U.S. hegemony. Consequently, there is a growing perception that the conflict in Ukraine may conclude without a demonstrable strategic victory for the United States, posing a serious problem for an empire reliant on an image of invincibility. Loss of that narrative threatens not only prestige, but also the fundamental foundation of the American financial system, which depends on global trust in U.S. economic and political supremacy. Therefore, simple demonstrations of power in the immediate neighborhood, pressure on weaker actors, or coercion of allied nations, are insufficient to communicate the strategic message required at this stage. Kidnapping sovereign leaders, disciplining peripheral states, or politically pressuring European allies fails to demonstrate the global reach of American military power in direct competition with rivals such as Russia and China. A clear and unambiguous projection of force far from U.S. territory is necessary, sending a signal that the empire retains the ability to impose order across the global stage. In this logic, the Middle East, particularly Iran, emerges as a geostrategic arena of exceptional importance, where potential subjugation carries both material and symbolic significance. Crushing Iran would not only provide control over key energy resources and trade routes, but also send a powerful message to the world that America remains capable of enforcing global order. Such a demonstration of force would aim to preserve confidence in the dollar and the entire financialized model, where the rest of the world produces real goods, while America maintains living standards through speculation and debt accumulation. Without that trust, the system would face massive capital flight, rapid selling of U.S. bonds, and the risk of a debt crisis threatening the foundations of the American financial model. In this sense, American interventionism no longer arises from confidence or strategic choice, but from existential dependence on maintaining the empire's image and its economic lifeline. The United States no longer wages war merely because it can. It acts because failing to demonstrate force risks collapse of the economic model that underpins its global influence and domestic stability.